The way you see the world is actually impacted by what you've seen, by your experiences. So there's certain experiences we've blocked off from, and certain gives us limitations in our thinking, in our openness, in the way we do things and live life generally, the way we treat people, that sort of thing. Because I know only one side of the wall, how we live on one side of the wall. Say you put me on the other side of the wall, I will treat people the way I've learned how to in my wall, which maybe is not the way they used to. And there's a whole conflict that arises from there. On 9 November 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. The event not only changed Germany and Europe, but reverberated around the whole world.
Cracking walls is an interesting concept. Obviously, in this context, it's about the physical destruction of the Berlin Wall.
We didn't know the moment. Maybe it will took 2 years, maybe 10.
It was all over the news.
It was my first time in the West, and I went over the border at this day, 9th of November, and I went to a friend in Kreuzberg, it's a district of West Berlin, and there were sitting the friends of East Berlin, and we had the same speech like in the pub in East Berlin. What then can we make with the GDR and so on? But the train of history, it was at another point, but we didn't know.
And for myself, I was completely surprised.
David Hasselhoff was playing on the wall.
That the next day we go to the West to see it.
But the wall is much more than just a physical wall. It was in Germany. It created a wall in people's minds. For me, at that time, it was the walls of apartheid have to come down.
There was suddenly a border between me and my friends. And then in South Africa, there was the border between the Afrikaners in Mayfair and those wealthy people, English-speaking people, in Parktown, and the barrier of both of them between the blacks.
3 months after the fall of the wall, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. Elections finally brought an end to the brutal apartheid regime.
And I would say now that the walls of apartheid have come down, it's more of a figurative wall.
Due to my age, I missed most of the apartheid times, but I was very exposed to people that were in the hardships. So the way that they live their lives and the sentiments that they hold, they still obviously impact my life.
We had two German states, the GDR and the Federal Republic of Germany, and so what we do since 2 decades is to transform our country into a new democratic state. What I find here is that there's a kind of same problem.
Walls, a potent symbol of a divided world, are not only historically valid for Berlin, but also for the fragmented South African society today.
Johannesburg is almost a walled city. Everywhere you go, you see people living, in their self-made prisons. Walls, barbed wire, dogs.
Wall means I have fear or I'm afraid of something.
While the Berlin Wall had been erected by the state, the citizens of South Africa's big cities built their walls in an attempt to insulate themselves from real and perceived danger. Here the walls are not imposed by political will, but reflect the way in which people construct and maintain isolation from one another. As far as that goes, the proliferation of walls in South Africa can be regarded as the expression of the failure of civil society.
Dit is lankal niks meer te maken met 'n spesifieke muur wat geval het nie, maar dit is die muur tussen swart en wit wat dan ons in is, maar ook natuurlik die muur tussen ryk en arm.
The walls that we have are often based on very arbitrary things that we have no control over. Our gender, our geography, our social status, our race, and our spiritual belief systems.
We are stimulating quite a lot of projects concerning walls, and we are not talking just about the materialized wall, but we are talking about the walls in your mind. That means gender. We are talking about poverty and other issues which are separating us.
They then translate themselves into mental walls, because a person coming out of that house out of that castle, out of that self-made prison, has got a very different reality or outlook on reality.
But that, to my way of thinking, is the way across the border. You have to talk to each other. You have to get to know the other party. You have to try and put yourself in their shoes in order to build a bridge.
I ask the people and then arrange something and they talk for themselves. We decide to do this collection of the sound installation, which means we ask a lot of people in Joburg, I think nearly 500, what are their fears?
A cultural institute is a meeting place, and the Goethe Institute here is an inclusive platform that raises questions about politics and art within the context of the commemoration of the fall of the wall.
I was working with high school kids that did some research on the fall of the wall. The group of students were divided into 4 groups. Like one group was working directly on the wall. The students created bricks for the wall that we then put together in the end. Another group was working on Western Germany and Eastern Germany, and then the reunited Germany. So they did some research on the history of the 2 different countries and the country how it is today. There was another group that was working on a film with a South African filmmaker. That was a little love story between East and West Germany. And then the last group was working with South African fabrics. It's the Shwe fabric, which originally was produced in Germany in the 1930s and then exported to South Africa. And today it's a real South African fabric and you can only get it in South Africa. So there was this kind of connection between Germany and South Africa.
We decided to paint a frame white, but 3-dimensional, so also the trees, the bus station, the wall in the back, and we project in the night the day scene, so it gets a weird feeling of 2-dimensional. And then we also started to play, okay, what can we put inside that image? For example, we have a window that is always there, but it's also white, and we open it up in the projection, and there's coming another image of maybe the water. That is, so we play also what can be behind the wall, what can be on the wall, to play with these layers.
It's a piece of abstract electronic music. There's a lot of rhythm inside, but it's always just really short pieces and going one into another, and it's really twisted stuff. It's hard to describe. I mean, it comes from pop and rock and jazz music, but it's something else. Lots of noises. All the sounds are made from artificial noises. I just use computer-generated sounds and also sounds from currency or from radiation or stuff like this. It's all connected to real-time visuals, and the visuals, they respond to the music and to the sounds, and to try to make music visible.
For my project, it was this is an area that I live nearby. So what I noticed about them, how they just built the RTP houses and they were living in shacks. The people were still had these shacks behind the houses and not like tearing them down or anything like that. So that's how I said they were between walls. They're between the wall of the shack which they come from and between the wall of the house that they live in now. So I wanted to shoot the person and in the background being like the house showing and the shack, some of being like both of them. So to show that these people are between the walls.
As an artist or a musician or a writer, you're always going to hit a wall. Even athletes, they say they hit that mental wall. And the thing is, if you can break through that wall, you grow as a person. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a mental wall, as long as you work it out. It's like peeling away an onion peel. When we went to Germany to tour, you can actually still see what that did to the country. Seeing apartheid and like what's happened, it's like it's still almost there.
Cracking walls culminates with the demolishing of a part of the wall that surrounds the Goethe Institute in Johannesburg on 9 November 2009.
Für uns in Deutschland sind Mauern im Prinzip einfach nur Hindernisse. Hier in Südafrika hat man das Gefühl, das ist die Sicherheit. Ja, ohne eine Mauer ist man nicht sicher. Aber das stimmt nicht. Die Statistik oder die Forschung sagt, Mauern sind kein Garant für Sicherheit. Es gibt andere Sicherheitsmaßnahmen, die genauso funktionieren, beziehungsweise sogar noch besser. Mauern, sogar undurchsichtige Mauern, sind sogar sehr viel gefährlicher, weil sie nicht zeigen, was hinter der Mauer passiert.
It started exploratively by looking at reinterpreting the notion of a borderless Goethe Institute, so Goethe Institute without a wall, what that could look like. The one designed by Lynette de Souza looked at a very subtle terracing of the landscape, so very much a landscape design. And the other design looked at fragmenting the wall, or taking the traditional notion of the wall as a barrier and making these sort of quite sensual, concave-shaped walls that allowed for a porosity of the site. Those two were designed, that's where the curved nature of this meandering pathway comes from, which kind of rubs up against the building and allows for a new entrance. So it plays and mediates between public, semi-public and private. So really kind of exploding the site and opening it up to the public realm.
When there is a lesson to be learned of that 9th of November 1989, then I think, it all revolves on the concept of freedom.
Since 15 years, you have free democracy and free elections. And since then, we have a united Germany.
That day marked really the victory of freedom over tyranny.
And now, 20 years later, we have an open institute here in Johannesburg. And that's what excites me a lot, and I hope you as well.
Come on, people!
I think probably quite relevant to the South African scenario.
I think it's a very good thing, and the way it's being celebrated, the event, I think is good because I see it's constructed to make you think about things.
I think it's brilliant, it really is.
It would really be nice, for instance, to be able to just walk the city of Johannesburg at any time.
But I think it's really daring and timely to make this because it's a clear political statement,
It's not only the war, but there is also a thing in human being that they have to change.
I think it brings the people closer together. It makes you realize that we don't actually need walls to keep ourselves apart from each other.
It's trying to push the notion that you can have freedom and still feel secure without building walls.
I think it's very important from a broader perspective to not just raise awareness but also produce very important artistic product around this issue at this time, which I think is great.
As time passes, there generally will always be walls separating us, unifying us. But I think we need to be brave enough and have the courage to actually go out there and break down the walls, see what's on the other side, Get to know the person, get to know people, and gain an understanding of each other.